Welcome back to Blast Off. We're here for another episode of the Blast Off with Bray, as well as the BAM podcast. So we're going to be talking with an angler that's experienced it all on a national scale, as well as a fantastic angler with a ton of experience over the years. His name is Darrel Ocamica, and we're going to dive into this week's episode. How are you doing today, Darrell?
I'm good. Good, Mike. How are you?
Not too bad. So thanks for coming on. I think we're going to have a pretty fun episode. We're going to talk a little bit about your backstory, your history, getting to the highest stage in professional fishing today,
Right.
what you're doing now on the West Coast, and also talk about some fundamentals that can help an angler go above and get prepared for that next step, and some things that we may not think of all the time, but also we're going to cover another tip of the week. So let's get started. Talk a little bit about your history, how you qualified for the Bassmaster Classic, how you fished in the Elite Series, and just give us a little bit of a rundown of who you are.
So I'm born and raised here in Idaho. Been here, like I said, my entire life. Got into bass fishing. Well, the property I grew up on was borderline to some fishing game property that I would cross jump the fence as a kid. There was bass ponds. I go down there and spend hours and hours and hours down there catching bass, and it just kind of developed into that as when I became an adult. Um, in 2003, I jumped into a pro-am circuit that we had here locally. It was called Superior Bass. It was a pro-am where you would partner up as a 2-day tournament. You get partnered up with a pro, um, fish those. So I fished those as a co-angler for 3 years. After 3 years, I knew I could be better than the guys that I was drawing. 2006, jumped into the first Superior tournament as a boater, and the rest is history. So from 2006 to 2000 till now, 2026, um, I've been fishing tournaments here locally. Started hearing more about the bass side of it. Guys, some of the older guys that were fishing here were fishing BASS. Bing Tessera was one that had a couple of good standout tournaments that was a little older than I. Jimmy Tessero, a few guys that were higher up the food chain than me. So I was like, how do I get to the next level? Fish Superior, Fish Superior. Then the next thing you know, it's like, hey, let's try the Federation route. Um, the year that I qualified for the Federation to go to divisionals, I actually didn't make the team. I had a tournament here on Brownlee, which you got to experience the last couple days. Um, the first day I did good. I was in like sixth place, fifth or sixth place. I don't remember exactly, but second day my boat had some electrical issues and my grass wouldn't turn on and the bite was offshore and couldn't fish any of the things I wanted to fish. Ended up plummeting and ended up finishing like 13th or 14th, which was out of this. At that time, the state team was devised of 10 boaters, 10 co-anglers. I ended up like 12th or 13th, whatever it was. We're in the week of divisionals that were at Lake Mead that time. The captain of the team calls me and says, hey, we had a couple guys drop out. We need another team guy. Is there any chance you can make it? And this is literally like 3 days before the divisional practice started. I'm like, well, I don't know. Talked to my wife, talked to my job, da, da, da. Next thing you know, 24 hours later, I was packed up in the truck headed to Lake Mead. Ended up fishing Lake Mead, had the second biggest bag of the tournament on the final day. Went from like 23rd place up to fifth. Ended up winning my state, which at that time, divisionals was based on the highest finishing boater and the highest finishing co-angler from each state qualified to the nation championship. At that particular time, nation championship was on Lake Conroe in Texas. We fished Lake Conroe for the nation championship in the fall. The very next spring was the classic. So if you did good at the nation championship, you qualified for that because they are having the classic site as the same as the nation championship site. So it kind of gave the nation guys a little bit of familiarity with the water. Anyway, showed up at Conroe, had a pretty decent tournament, ended up being the highest finishing boater, but I did not win. A co-angler actually won the Derby. He was from Louisiana, had spent a bunch of time there, found a bunch of offshore fish. Fortunately, drew guys that let him go after those fish, and he won. I think he beat me by 10 or 12 pounds. I think it was quite substantial. It's probably going to be the only time that happens that a co-angler wins the national championship. But anyway, long story short, Ryan Levine won. I got second. Timmy Klinger, another great West Coast angler, got third. We all punched our tickets to the nation championship or to classic. And when you win the nation or when you finish at the nation, there's an Elite Series invite. The Elite Series invite comes to the highest finisher. Well, if the highest finisher declines that invite, it goes to second place. Well, at that particular time, I finished second, so that elite invite came to me. But they only give you, I don't even think it was 24 hours to make that decision to decide whether you can have the financial backing to be able to go do that or whatnot. So I got home. Fortunately for me, I had some private investors that said, "Hey, go. We got you. You just go fishing." So, needless to say, I took the Elite Series invite. So that would have been for the Classic of 17, the Elite Series for 17, and the Elite Series for 18. Fished 18 tournaments through those 2 years. Got to experience St. Lawrence River, Champlain, um, Sabine River in Texas, Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend. Um, what's the one in Mississippi? Not Ben. Gosh dang it. It's in Jackson, Mississippi. But anyway, I got to see lots of diverse Okeechobee, um, lots of different places. Anyway, it was a great opportunity to see. But the one thing that like, Brandon does really good on the Elite Series, being from Idaho. Coeur d'Alene is a place that's diverse, you have grass. For a guy like me in the south part of the state, we don't have those vegetations. We don't have very much dock fishing. We don't have pelagic fish. We don't have so knowing what a shat spawn is, knowing what all these different things are was a serious crash course. So in the heat of the moment, guys that I've made friends with kind of helped giving me tips and things to look for. And hey, this is how this goes down. These are the water temperatures that these things happen. These are the different things to look for when to to what you're going to experience when you get out in those stages. The other thing that people don't consider too back east is, more than fishing, navigation. I mean, if anybody's ever experienced the East Coast, which a lot of West guys have, maybe some haven't, but some of the lakes have boat lanes where you got to navigate the lake via a boat lane, which is just like our highways that run through your cities. And let's take Toledo Bend for example. You have way I classified it was you have freeways, highways, city roads, country roads. Okay, your freeways are the main boat lane that basically goes around the lake. Your highways are what cross the centers of the lake. Your city roads are your boat lanes that enter pockets or arms. And then your country roads, which sometimes can't or aren't marked, are to get you to the backs of those pockets. And sometimes, if you don't know it, you have to idle, and that pocket might be half a mile to a mile long to get to the back of that. And if you don't know it, I mean, there's so much standing and flooded timber. You either run it, take a chance, or you idle the whole thing. So there's lots more to the equation to this bass fishing when you get to that level that a lot of guys. Now the guys back east that deal with it all the time, they're a little more versed in it because that's what they do all the time. But for us West Coast guys, it's a bit of a learning curve in some situations.
And that's one thing that really surprises me because when you talk about the West Coast angler, you talk about generally how structured they are on all these different bodies of water being in the general radius of California, for example. You've got the Delta, you've got Clear Lake. You can go to the motherlode fisheries. You can go catch spotted bass, smallmouth or largemouth, all within about an hour to 2 hour radius. Up here in Idaho, I mean, we fished Brantley the last couple days. A fantastic smallmouth fishery, which should be pretty exciting for the Super 60. Um, we should be going to Cascade tomorrow to see what the largemouth scene is like, but you really don't have spotted bass up here.
Zero.
You really don't have a lot of the shallow water fisheries like the California Delta. So, um, is that a true statement that the Western angler is dominant on the Eastern circuits because of their diverse fisheries? Or is it depending on where of the West you're coming from?
Yeah, it does. Like, you take your California guys, you think about what they have. They have a tidal fishery, which is the Delta. They have vegetation, which is the Delta. Which is funny is, before I took this adventure, I went through the nation. Well, I had never really fished any. I got more experience on East Coast lakes than I do any of the West Coast stuff. That's why the Super 60 for me was so inviting, is because the no practice, the 30 days off limits, that puts, for the most part, an angler skills versus all the other guys' skills. Now you have history. Some of these guys have history in all these places, so they have things that they can run back and check and look through, but they got to do it tournament day. They don't have 3 days before the Derby to go through and know, hey, that place they ain't catching fish, but that one's got a pile or that one's got a pile. They got to do that tournament day. That still takes time, but they still, I would consider that maybe a little bit of an upper hand, but for the most part, if you're confident in your skills, I'm all for going after it and, seeing where I stand up as far as a competitive level.
Yeah, and what about competitive level in terms of the no info rule and how that's changed over the last couple of years? We were talking about back when you were in the Elite Series, it was a little more lenient. Nowadays, it's pretty cracked down. I mean, on our circuit, 30-day off limits, no info rule for that unless you're a competitor. But does it, I mean, with that leniency, is there a bit bigger upper hand compared to what you're seeing now where
Ab
guys are getting
Absolutely. I mean, because this is personal experience. I ran into this, especially like when we fished Toledo Bend in 2017. Well, all the top guys were hiring guides to know what part of the lake was on or whatever. So when I experienced this, I called the head of the John, gosh dang it, what's John's last name? Anyway, I called John, he was head of the federation at the time, said, "Hey, how do I deal with this?" He said, "You do everything you can within the rules to be successful. So whatever that entails." So I got to see two different sides of it. The first year I was there, 17, there was no off limits and no, like, you could get any information you wanted no matter what. 2018, they dropped it. And it was, as soon as they announced the schedule, you get no information. It wasn't 30 days, it wasn't nothing. It was, so in January when the Elite Series schedule came out, bang, you couldn't talk to nobody other than another angler about any of the body waters to do anything. And that's including navigation, that's including anything. You couldn't get any information at all. So it was kind of two different contrasts for me to see one side that was very lenient to the other side that was super strict.
Yeah, and what about going to that more strict, atmosphere? Having good competitors is pretty important for that, guys that you room with, guys that you travel with, whatever it may be, and you made some pretty good relationships. I know
Yeah.
you were pretty, close with Ike, you were pretty close with Kevin, a lot of really fantastic guys that are still doing it today, but, what kind of character do you have to be accepted by those elite group of anglers, and where do the new guys mess up just not having the same, compatibilities, I guess, or
Well, I can't speak on what is currently happening on that side because I haven't been a part of it for when we were there. Like the relationship I had with Ike happened at the Classic in 17. And that's how I established a relationship with him is because we were, there was my primary area that I had dedicated where I thought I was going to do good, ended up not being so good. But I had a secondary area, but some of the guys that were in the top were in that secondary area, so I went in there. I stuck my head in there the first day, but I didn't really do much. Second day, I went in there and made sure when I went in there, the guys that were leading and doing good, I made sure that I wasn't encroaching anywhere close to where they were. So I stick my head in there, and it's a pretty big area. If you're familiar with Conroe, it's the second jungle there below the 1097 bridge. Anyway, I'm in there fishing some buckbrush, and I pay attention. Couple thousand yards away, Ike was over there because you could tell he had a flotilla of like 8 or 10 boats that were following him. I think Hackney was in there too. He was off on the other side of it, way away from me. And there was some buckbrush that I had caught some fish in practice. So I started flipping the buckbrush. Well, I'm going through flipping the buckbrush. Next thing you know, I catch a 3 pounder. Sweet. Put it in there. I'm fiddling with my fish and I look up. Next thing you know, when Ike was 2,000 yards away, I peek up and he's 200 yards away. And he actually came and started on other side of the buckbrush, kind of as a horseshoe shape. He started on the other end of the buckbrush coming through. Soon as I seen that, I just set my rod down, say, "Hey, how you doing, Ike?" "Oh, I only got 3 fish." "Oh, well, I just caught a 3 pounder. I'm in nowhere in contention. This, he was, knocking on the door of the Super Six for the final day." I said, "Here, you go ahead." So I set my rod down. I started trolling out. And I didn't know Ike at the time. I just, there's no reason for me to catch those fish. If he has a chance to win the world championship of bass fishing, why would I, a 4 pounder or a 5 pounder does me no service, but a 5 pounder for him would do a lot. So I start trolling away. Well, I get probably 300 or 400 yards away. Next thing you know, his flotilla just starts cheering, hooping on, normal Ike style. He's freaking out because he just caught a 3.5. That was his fourth fish. I get a little ways out, almost to the point where I'm going to get on pad and take off, and the dude lights up again. I think it was a 4.5 or a 5 pounder that he caught. Well, that fish vaulted him into the Super Six for the final day. So we come full circle that day. We get back to the weigh in. We come back to Astro Stadium, go through the weigh in, weigh the little bit of fish that I had, got my stage time. I go. at there, you go underneath the stadium, and there was a room that was just dedicated for the anglers. We were in there. Well, Ike just beeline right for me. Hey, dude, appreciate you, man. That was a pretty solid, solid thing you did. Let me have that, dude. Exactly like I thought. I'm not in position to do good. There's no sense in me doing that. So you go ahead, and ended up you finished, I think, third in that classic or fourth in that classic. Had a really good shot to win. On the first day, I think he caught a 10 pounder or nine something. I mean, he was just had a really good shot. So from that moment on, even through the Elite Series, I actually stored my truck and boat at Ike's house in New Jersey. I still talk to him now and again, text message or call. I'm, Becky, his wife, they're just great people. For ICAST in 17, I got to travel with them. I actually still have a box somewhere up here, but it's an ICAST pass that says Becky Iaconelli. I was Becky Iaconelli running around ICAST because I didn't have any credentials to get in there. So she just handed me one of her passes, and that pass is Becky Iaconelli for the whole ICAST. So it's pretty funny.
Awesome. I mean, that right there, that one small step of kindness, I mean, vaulted into a relationship to where you're still able to call and text and
Yeah,
you guys are buddies now.
yeah.
What is it on the flip side that guys that may just be getting into the industry tournaments the last couple of years, they're hot headed, they have an ego, they're ready to go win. What's that biggest misinterpretation in the sport where they can burn a lot of bridges just as quickly?
Unwritten rules. Back, I would say, I guess you consider, I guess I am an old timer, I guess. Um, the ethics rules, the ethics of things that are unwritten, knowing, perfect example when you're in a tournament, whether it's a 2-day tournament or a 3-day tournament or even a 4-day tournament. If it's not something that you fished the first day, you have and the guy that fished it the first day is doing good, you have no business showing up on that particular area or spot or whatever. And it happens more than it should. Guys that are in the top that are catching them, they're not catching them as well. Hey, you know what? I'm going to go in that area because the leader's in there. Dude, that's wrong. I don't give. If you didn't do your work, then you just do what you do and handle it how you should. Next time you do better and practice a little bit different and find those areas. But you don't go encroach on somebody that's having a good tournament just because they're catching them and you're not. It seems to be happening a lot more where guys end up in places when they really shouldn't. Now, if you practice that and you're going to fish that, maybe you're not going to fish it on day one, but you're going to fish it day two, you need to stick your head there day one. Show face in that area or whatever that is on day one. So nobody can say, well, you weren't here day one. You didn't come in here. If you show your face in there day one, then you have rights to fish it day two. But if you don't show in there day one, you dang sure shouldn't stick your head in there day two or day three or day four for that matter, just because you're getting your teeth kicked in by somebody else.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, a lot of it comes down to it might be a split decision right then that you think it's your spot, it might be your water, but that does have consequences when later down the road you want to be friends with that guy and he tells his friends and then you fall out of the loop or not.
It,
I mean, these guys have a lot of history and that history comes with a little bit of a leverage to just play by the rules. And I mean, you may think you know the rules, and rules generally don't change that much. It's still pretty black and white at the end of the day.
well, the unwritten rules that are the ethics portions are still tried and true. The difference is a lot of the youngsters coming in aren't getting taught by the old heads or understanding those ethics. They're coming in and just trying, not necessarily bullying people, but they're going to end up putting themselves in a bad situation because they don't understand how things work. And, if you want to play in an adult world, you're going to accept adult consequences. And who knows how that ends up?
Yeah.
It might be hands thrown. It might be, who knows? It could be there's a magnitude of all sorts of different scenarios that could possibly happen. So, you're an adult. If you're going to play in an adult world, understand you're going to accept adult, consequences.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Let's talk about going into a different direction a little bit. The future of the Western angler. I talked about this topic a little bit with one of our last guests on the show. We have some of the top forward-facing sonar scopers on the West Coast right now. I feel like, and probably in the nation, just because of how in tune, how diverse they are with it. But do you think that we're losing some of the quality of the flippers, the guys that know how to throw a jig, fish offshore, throw a Carolina rig, whatever that may be? Do you think they're losing those techniques that are still a heavy player when they get into those higher levels?
Yep, I really do because you take the years and years and years of understanding, like, even when I came into fishing, GPS and all that stuff wasn't a thing. The heads that I fished with triangulated. They have a post on the hill there, and they have a tree there, and they would triangulate that, and that's where the spot was. There was no or marker buoy. Man, you don't ever see marker buoys no more ever on a boat either, where guys throw a marker buoy out to mark something, and they slide off it, start either cranking it or throwing a jig at it or whatever they're doing to catch their fish. But you don't see those things anymore because the electronics portion of the world has evolved so much that now with this forward face, even me, I mean, I got Active Target 2XL. It's the latest and greatest from Lowrance, and I love it. It's a tool that I will use as long as it's something to be utilized. You either adapt or you get left behind. But what I would really like to see is, and Bass is doing that this year. Seems like is they're splitting up the season. They're going half and half. They're going half with it and half without it. I think that's a great mix being able to put. But the ones that I would like to see them not use forward facing on are the ones where forward facing runs the tournament. So any lake that's a pelagic fish, whether it's an all white, a shad, whatever that offshore fish is, I'd like to see those be traditional techniques and then forward facing used on something. I mean, if it's a mud fishery where it's shallow, it's real hard to do. Like, I mean, 0 to 5 feet, you can really only use perspective or scout mode to see what you're looking at, to see the structure and something like that. But I don't know. I don't know what that equation looks like, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to get left behind. I'm going to do my due diligence and try and figure out and be the best at it that I can possibly be.
And that's a good, motive to have. I mean, there's a lot of people that they hear live scope and they go the other direction and they put their head in the sand. Unfortunately, to be competitive, you kinda have to pick up that, mentality of what live scope is and learn how to use it whether you like it or not. Because right now it's prevalent and it may not be in 5 years, but at the moment, if you wanna win 50 grand in the Super 60, you might have to turn it on at some point in the tournament. Um, you fish, I mean, pretty regularly, multiple days a week, it seems like,
Yeah.
long hours on the lake.
Yep.
There's a lot of guys that are successful in life and business. They're fishing the tournament trails, but they don't get that time on the water. Do you think you're still expanding more? I mean, every time you go out? Or,
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah,
Absolutely. I learn something new every time, even on our bodies of water. I'm always constantly trying different techniques, fishing different parts of the water, different things, doing different things to try and keep an edge, as far as understanding, trying different heads or like we were talking about jigs, we were talking about football heads and where I don't throw a 90-degree eye just for the simple fact you lose fish, in my opinion. I throw a 60-degree eye, just doing different things like that. This spring I was flipping at Lake Lowell, which is a lake that's just about 20 minutes from here. There's a big Brandon did a big deal about it, to snell or not to snell, whether you're using a straight shank hook or just a normal EWG flipping hook. And I have really messed with a straight shank hook, not snelling it. And this year I kind of picked one up and started messing with flipping with a straight shank hook, but doing a Palomar knot to it instead of snelling it. And it seems to me that the hookup ratio still seems to be, it might be a little better than the EWG because of the design of the hook, but your things you can take into consideration are what bait are you throwing? Is the throw to that hook big enough to absorb that bait being wadded up on the hook? Are you still going to be able to get a hook penetrated through it to be able to get a hook and a fish to make sure you get it? Because like we have a spring tournament here, and I wish you could flip 100% and get 100% of the fish, but it's just not. I haven't figured out that equation, and I don't know who has or hasn't, but doesn't seem like you see 'em you watch MLF or you watch bass, guys flipping grass, whatever, they lose a few fish, like, it's not 100% deal every time. So,
cool. All right, well, save that thought. We're going to go into our next segment as soon as we're back, and we're going into fine tuning some of the key structures that you may know. We're going to get a little bit deeper in that. So, in just a second, in the meantime, make sure you subscribe, check out this great video with our partners, and we'll be back shortly.
Hey, Northern California bass anglers. Ready to elevate your fishing game? Ford Fairfield partners with Bass Angler Magazine to offer top-notch trucks tailored for your needs. Our simple pricing ensures a fair deal and exceptional service. We live and breathe bass fishing, participating in local tournaments to understand exactly what you need so you never miss a good bite. Visit Ford Fairfield today and let's hit the water together.
Competitive anglers powered by Mercury Pro XS outboards have won more bass fishing tournaments than all other brands combined. With lightning-quick acceleration, legendary reliability, and lightweight design, Pro XS has everything you need to travel farther, faster, and harder.
All right, we're back and we're here to talk about fine-tuning the fundamentals with Darrel Ocamica. Again, Darrel's had a fantastic time on the Elite Series. He fished for a couple years doing that. He's still fishing pretty heavily on the West Coast in the Super 60. And every time he fishes a tournament, he's very, very structured and very fine-tuned in what he's doing, because every mistake can cost a fish, cost a check, and when your livelihood depends on it, it's important to make sure that you're up to date and set up correctly. So we're going to talk about a few different topics. The first one we're going to go into is knot placement, the right knot for the right job, braid to leader knots, the difference between Palomar and some of the other knots you may use. And we're going to let Darrel take the lead with that one and just dive right in.
So for me, I'm a pretty straightforward guy. I have friends that, so let's just talk about flipping, for instance. Flipping, if I'm flipping anything, if it's anything other than grass, I flip straight fluorocarbon. Line diameters to decide on how, what structure it is or how abrasive, whatever it is I'm fishing. So, but generally, rule of thumb for me is a 17 or a 20. Sometimes I'll step to 25 on flipping. If I'm flipping grass, it's straight braid. I have a few friends that do a braid to leader, so a braid to fluoro combination when they're flipping. I don't do that because to me, it's about how many things in the equation that can go wrong. If I don't have an extra knot in that equation to go wrong, then I don't do it. But as far as flipping is concerned, that's pretty much my setup. Pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. If I'm reaction fishing, which I'm a big power fisherman, so throwing crankbaits, chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, rattle traps, whatever else, I'm usually a 10-pound fluorocarbon, 12-pound fluorocarbon, or a 15, depending on what I'm doing. Pretty cut and dry there. Top water wise, I throw top water on braid. If it's a walking bait, like you were having trouble the other day when we were out on Brownlee, normally what I'll do is like a 2-foot section of copolymer, like a 20 or 25-pound copolymer. It'll be just a short, just to keep that braid from grabbing that front hook, so you can keep that bait from walking. Frogging, I don't do a leader there. That's just straight braid to the frog. That's obvious. Pretty cut and dry there. Spin rods wise, I'm a braid to fluoro guy. I learned a lesson. So the last year I was on the Elite Series, I got to jump in the boat with Hank it was our day before the tournament started, and down below the St. Lawrence River, below the spillway, we'd go down there, there's still a pile of smallmouth down there. We'd go down there, and him and I were doing this drift, and he is just kicking my butt. Like, I'm like, what? I'm doing the same drift, everything. And my bait wasn't as, I told you this the other day, my bait wasn't as natural as his was. And the reason is I was a 15-pound braid with a 8-pound leader. He was throwing a 10-pound braid with a 6-pound leader. Well, I'm like, so I started doing that. Well, the resistance was the difference of that setup. I had to use a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight. This setup, I could use a 3/16 or a 3/8, something smaller. So your bait had a lot better profile. Well, as soon as I started doing that, man, I started getting a whole bunch more bites. So there was a lot of things that I wasn't super versed in when I got the opportunity to go to the Elite Series. Lake Travis, for instance, was a flipping bite. Brent Chapman was up in the same area that I was fishing. He ended up like 4th or 5th. And because of the inadequacies in my abilities at that time, that should have been a top 5 finish for me, because I had the bites to get me to the final day. I mean, I lost a 6-pounder. Like I was telling you, Mike Marshall was sitting here, and that 6-pounder jumped literally. I mean, he could have reached out and grabbed it if he'd have been on point, because it jumped so close to the boat. You think back on all those opportunities because you missed those because of your equipment or because the knot you tied or because how you did it or whatever. It just goes to show you how much that this stuff matters in the details. So like tying a braid to fluoro, um, I I used to tie the modified Albright, and it was a pretty decent knot, but I got to spend a lot of time with guys that are really, really good, especially like Berkeley. When they travel for the Elite Series, they have a knot machine. Now, that doesn't necessarily pertain to braid to leader, but understanding knots, the Palomar, the clinch, there's the San Diego Jam, there's a few of them that guys tie, and it's what you have confidence in. For me, I have a lot of confidence in the Palomar, but I also tie it correctly. And guys, well, I tie it correctly. Well, I would like to see how you tie it because chances are you don't. There's a lot of things that people miss that are super finite details of that knot. That if you miss those, I promise you, you'll break that knot and you'll lose confidence in a knot just for those facts alone. And I demonstrated that to Mike yesterday when we were out on the water. It's like, yeah, I tied the Palomar. Like, oh yeah, let me see. As soon as he started tying, I was like, nope, I can tell you right now, that's not. And I showed him the way, and it actually made sense to him. What I showed him are the two characteristics that you look for or do. And he's like, oh, that makes sense. And ever since I started doing it, Brandon did the same thing. He ties a Palomar, but he also pays attention to the same thing I described to you. So understanding what you do in the details really makes a difference to how successful you can be. You know, like I said, I'm a power fisherman in the springtime here throwing crankbaits for smallmouth. It's amazing how many guys don't change hooks. It's important. Not factory hooks are not aftermarket hooks. They're very, very different. Changing hooks on a bait can change the action of the bait. Heavier, like there's so many. It's like the old suspend dots for jerk baits that guys used to do back in the day. You know, there's so many little details that guys, when you get dove into those things, you can really advance your abilities in doing different things by, different. Yeah, can you go throw a jerk bait and catch fish? Yeah, but is there little tweaks you can make to sometimes get 2 or 3 or 4 more bites? You bet you there is.
And what is that? I mean, is it just trial and error when you're going and testing different baits, what works, what doesn't? There's a lot of people when they open that package, they generally don't mess with it, and I'm one of them. I mean, you can throw a Berkeley Chapo and throw those hooks that are on there, but after about 5 fish, those hooks get dull pretty quick, and then you start losing and jumping off more big ones than you're getting in the boat. So changing those hooks out is kind of critical. Throwing a Yamamoto Senko, having that right hook if it's a Texas, I mean, let's talk into that portion next. What are the key, I guess, how important is it to understanding the different types of hooks that are out there for you to use and what situations to use them in when you choose, say, for the Senko, for example, a Nico rig, a Texas rig, putting it on a Carolina rig, all these different ways to throw a Senko, um, and all these different hooks that you can use. What makes those little bit of differences, and I guess how expansive is that?
So, okay, let's take Carolina rigging, for instance. Yesterday when you and I were out there, um, I was Carolina rig. So the hook I use when I Carolina rig, because a lot of times we Carolina rig where it's deeper, um, we I used there's a owner twist lock, but it's a light wire hook. And it says specifically on the package, it's specifically designed for Yamamoto Senkos. The reason I use it is because, like Brownlee, for instance, or Strike, when we're Carolina rigging, usually we're in 15, 20, 25, 30, sometimes 35 foot of water. Well, your efficiency in the drag, if you're fishing a particular piece of structure or you're on a flat and you're dragging the flat, if your weight happens to get hung up and you snatch it off that rock, if it's just a normal Texas rig hook, your bait has a tendency to slide down and it's balled up on the hook. So you got to reel it back in, fix your bait, throw it back out. Well, in this twist lock design hook that I use, now you got to take into consideration what kind of fish you're catching. You know, if you're catching 6 or 7 pound largemouth, would this hook stand up? I don't. It would be, you'd have to know when you're fighting them that hook's like fishing Rorschach for the big smallmouth. I use that hook, but I understand that my drag better be set because they can straighten it just like a big largemouth could. But if you're fishing 4 pound smallmouth, I'm not so worried about them straightening it. They're not that tough. But I use it because of efficiency. If I throw that out there and I get hung on a rock and I pop it off the rock, my bait is not going to get slid down the hook. So I can actually just let it set right back. Because if a fish is watching that bait and you go to reel it in because that's gone, well, you lose that opportunity maybe to catch that fish that could have been looking at your bait. So if I can leave it in place and my efficiency on casts and I get more casts that are in the, you know, it just makes it a better opportunity to get more bites during the day that could turn into doing better in whatever tournament or wherever it is you're fishing.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, that's very critical. I mean, especially when it's a tournament day, you've only got 8 hours, and
Right.
if you have to recast 30 times, that's 5 minutes right there. If it's, putting the wrong hook on and you break off on that key fish of the day, you're out a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, let's talk about I mean, we talked about line a little bit, we talked about hooks. But there's only one key thing that really keeps all those tied together, and that's what rod you're throwing. If you're like me, a fun fisherman, I guess, not overly competitive, you may throw a 7.2 to 4 for a jig. You may tie a Carolina rig on it. You may tie a spinnerbait on it. If I'm fishing with you, it's very noticeable that you have a very different rod for every single technique. Some are short, some are long, some are different. Um, just different, strength factors, backbone in it. How I guess, how important is it leveling up to make sure your gear matches what you're throwing, and has that made a difference for you?
Absolutely. You gotta, I mean, if it's a difference of landing a fish to not landing a fish based on, so like, I either use a Loomis, Shimano, or I have George Roth as a custom rod builder here about 40 minutes from where I live. And I think I'm to the point where I think probably more custom rods from him than I have Loomis, just because the rod that he builds to me is mm, I can't buy a factory rod that is built like he builds them. Sensitivity wise, like my spinning rods are all weighted in the butt, so they're balanced. Your sensitivity factor in them, their exposed grip, like it's really a everybody that puts one of those in their hands really, they're like, wow, this thing is amazing. Like it's a really a stand up rod. A lot of my reaction rods, I do have a couple factory reaction rods, but a lot of my chatterbait, spinnerbait, trap rods, stuff like that are what I would consider a not a parabolic bend, but I like a soft tip, fast load. Um, we Bruce Holt, him and I used to get into conversations about this. And if you don't know who Bruce Holt is, he was the one that helped Gary Loomis start Loomis Rods in the very beginning. When Gary started G Loomis, Bruce was hand in hand with him. Well, Bruce happens to be a brother of a very good friend of mine, so that's how I got to meet Bruce. He worked for G Loomis for 40 some years, like a long time. Even after the acquisition of Shimano, when Shimano came in and bought Loomis, he still worked for Loomis. But him and I would get into conversations about cranking and whatnot. And he would always bring KVD into the conversation because if you ever see KVD, his rods are super parabolic. Like his cranking rods, they're almost a noodle. And he said that because fighting big fish, that parabolic helps you fight and keep those fish pegged. Well, for me, that doesn't necessarily work. Like I've tried those and it seems to be more work than it's worth. So I found something that works for me, and I'm sure every fisherman is the same way. You're going to have to find a rod that fits to what your needs are. If you think this is how it should be, then follow what that is. If it's a 3 power for throwing a crankbait or a chatterbait, then throw a 3 power. If that's what puts confidence in you, then throw that. Now, on your day off when you're out fun fishing and you have the ability to try a different rod or try something new, maybe give it a shot to see if you can expand your horizons to know, well, this might be better or that might be better or whatever. And that's what time on the water does. So knowing what, like flipping a jig or flipping trees or structure, I got a custom made 4 power that George makes me. It's also a weighted butt or weighted rod, help with balance for when you pitch to help. It actually helps on fatigue, the bite indication, all that stuff. I would love to put that in anybody's hands to tell me they got a rod way it fishes is better because it's pretty significant. But like I said, each person is going to put a rod in their hands and decide that's for me or that's not for me. That doesn't fit my characteristics or that does fit my characteristics. It just kind of depends on the person using it.
And can you waste time on the water? Especially, I mean, in the tournament series, you only have 3 days of practice in the elites or however much time you expend for each event. But when you're on the road and you live on the other side of the nation, it's hard.
Yeah.
Even for the Super 60s, it's a 15-hour drive for some of these guys to get to Brownlee. And that's probably the average drive for you to a lot of these bodies of water.
Yeah, like this is the first time that I get one in my home, at home. I mean, the Columbia River's close, but everything else we fish is 10, 12, 15 hours away. So Yeah, I don't, you have to do a lot of map study and what's not done under the bodies of water. And but it's fun for me. Like I said, the last one we were at Havasu, I actually had a good finish. I mean, the worst finish you want, but it was still for points wise, it was good. But first place out of the money is never where you want to be. But for me, that was a good, strong finish. I've never seen Havasu. I've never had a boat on Havasu. Those are the only 2 days that I've ever spent on Havasu, and I ended up beating 50 of the other, West Coast guys for never seeing a body of water. I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to do it. Um, But I guess what other tips can you give in terms of guys that may just be getting into the sport to expand? I know when I got started, I was pretty confident at throwing a jig, a drop shot, and all these very simplistic baits, even a Kitech with a 2.8 on our 2.8 ball head. But when you get to a chatterbait, a spinnerbait, finding the right blades for a spinnerbait, all these different cadences that make a difference. How do you level up your game with that?
Information, knowing if you're from a particular place and there's guys that are seasoned veterans that they do this on the regular. You're not asking them for their super secret tips and tricks, but just characteristics. Hey, why do you choose this? Why do you choose this trailer? And what characteristics drive you to choose these trailers? And over the years, that's the opportunity that I've had, conversations I've had with different people. It's like talking to Hackney about flipping, like probably one of the best flippers there are. Like he is, I mean, and he flips the same bait that I flip, Strike King structure bug. That's probably, in my opinion, the best all around flipping bait you can throw. The green pumpkin swirl blue, I can take that bait anywhere in the country. I don't care where you go. You will catch a bass on it no matter where you go. So having confidence in knowing those baits that you can take Reaction Innovations beaver, you know dang well you can take a green pumpkin or a green pumpkin swirl or something like that, take it anywhere. Chances are you're going to get bit on that bait. So knowing those things, and what you start doing once you get to whether it's a reaction bait or whatever, like I particularly have a jerk bait that's my favorite. I have a crankbait that's one of my favorites, and it's been tried and true, tested across the country. But to me, it's what I'm targeting. Am I targeting a particular depth? I'm not cranking just a crank. Whether you're fishing 0 to 3, I'm going to throw a square bill at this in 0 to 3 depth, or I'm throwing a 0 to 10 diver because I'm targeting 7 to 10. The crankbait fits whatever it is you're targeting, whether it's rock, whether it's wood, whether it's grass. I mean, there is times to crank grass too. Like you have one that goes above the grass. If the grass is a small at the bottom, the bottom foot or whatever. I mean, so you get over the time, you start using these different baits and being versed and trying as much as possible. I mean, you came to my house, what's playing on TV? Fishing.
Left, right, now.
Dang sure fishing every day. I watch so many dang fishing shows. I watch and learn. Like I'm just a sponge when it comes to this stuff. And I figure if you stop learning and you might as well just quit, because there's something you can learn every day, no matter when you go out to understand, to make your game a little bit better.
And one thing about learning, talking about what was on your TV, I mean, when I got on there, for some reason, I have a slight appreciation for the older TV shows. So we pulled up the 2001 on the Columbia River. And again, they were catching a couple fish a day on a Carolina rig.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of guys don't throw these days. And that's why it's going to be our Tackle Warehouse tip of the week if you follow along for a little bit longer. But for the people that may not watch the old school shows, the shows from 5 to 6 years ago, or even 20 years ago, I mean, are they missing some of the key fundamentals that those guys learned before they had a lot of technology at their fingertips?
The old ball and chain I tell you, I can't tell you how many fish I've caught on it. I do it a ton. It works. I do it for largemouth at a Waihee. That one I was telling you about, it's a rock lake that's, man, Carolina rig in the summertime there can be just absolutely deadly. On days where you can't eat, I'll pick up a jig, throw a jig through the same area. They won't touch it for some reason. Carolina rig lizard, Carolina rig fluke. You could even Carolina rig a Senko. Like there's lots of different baits you can put on there, and it just flat gets bit. And guys do it different. Like I said, the leader length can be determined. It's almost like drop shotting, right? How are you drop shotting? Are you doing a short leader because the fish are low to the bottom? And that's also too drop shotting. Are you vertically fishing it? Are you casting it? If you're casting it, your leader needs to be longer, because weight on the bottom, depending on where that bait is. The longer your leader, the higher up off the bottom at an angle that bait is going to be. So there's lots of characteristics to think about, but you got to think about how you're fishing it, what you're fishing it on, and how you should present that or what gives it the best opportunity. But for me, like I said, for Super 60, when we come back, we're gonna there's gonna be a lot of things utilized, but Carolina rig's probably gonna see some play for sure.
Awesome. Do you want to pick it up and show the camera what you do to set it up? What those beads are for? What hook you use? Different types of baits you can use on it, which are pretty versatile. And let's give us a quick rundown for this week's tip of the week.
So this is 4 power, 7/6, flip it 6. So you want heavy power. Your reel needs to be preferably 8.5 to 1 or faster, because a lot of times on a drag you have to pick up a lot of line. And usually on a Carolina rig you'll want to. So if you throw it out and you're on a big long drag and you feel one pick it up, before I ever set the hook, generally I'll just take off reeling and try and pick up some of that slack. And what happens is when you pick up that line, that rod will load. And as soon as that rod loads, that's when you sting. Your hookup ratio will go through the roof if you understand that reel set. Now, I'm an old school lead user, just because you do get hung up a lot. I don't cry when I lose lead. Tungsten is better because you feel so much more, but I'm not throwing well, now the prices are through the roof, but I'm not throwing tungsten down there, because if you lose 10 or $12 every, 5 or 6 times a day, that's the problem. So I just use lead. It depends on the size wise. 3/4 and 1 ounce are the general ones that I use. Sometimes I'll go to a 1/2 ounce if I'm fishing a little shallower. I do beads. I'll vary, sometimes both red, some yellow. And then this is for sound, as that's bouncing across the bottom, the beads. Plastic beads compared to glass beads can make a difference. You get a little bit of different sound. So it's kind of like a crankbait. The sound of a bait coming through, you get a wide wobble or narrow wobble, the sound, a knock or whatever. These beads, sometimes I do it without a bead. The other thing that I do if I'm not using a bead is I actually use a bobber stop. I put a bobber stop right above the knot to help the weight not bang against the knot, because the more that bangs against that knot, the more chance you have of breaking that knot, because your weight's going to cut your line instead of the fish. So just a little tip there. If you want to save in the long run and you're not going to use a bead's not very abrasive. Over the years in doing this, I haven't had a bead cut my line like I have just had a straight weight do it. So if you're going to go just straight weight with no beads, put a uh, bobber stop or 2 bobber stops above it. That'll keep you from cutting your line. And then on the hook, this is that uh, owner twist lock. That's a light wire. Um, what happens is too, when you buy the hook, this point actually is pointing at that eyelet. One trick that I do is you grab your hook by the right below the barb and you open that hook, and I'll parallel this to the body of the hook. And by doing that, your hookup ratio go through the roof, because when you look at the hook brand new, that hook point is actually pointed down at that eyelet. So when it's in a fish's mouth, the hook point is never, so you get a better hookup ratio when you level those out. Other than that, pretty much easy. And the way I tie it, I will start with weight first. I tie the swivel on, pull some line off, cut the line, and then flip that around so I can tie a Palomar for all 3 knots. So Palomar, Palomar, Palomar. In tying a Palomar, the things to look for is when you tie it, you don't cinch it down to your whatever it is you're tying to. You cinch it down to the line above that, and then pull, obviously wet it, and then pull it down. And by doing that, there's little or no resistance, because the biggest thing that people talk about a Palomar is heat. Heat is what kills your knots. If you get a knot hot, it makes it brittle, gives you an opportunity. The other thing to look for is where the line goes through your eyelet. You want to make sure that on a Palomar, your line is laying sideways. You never want to see it twisted up like that. If you ever see it twisted like that, cut it and retie it, because what happens is that's your break offs. If you have a break off on a hook set or something, chances are the interior of your knot was like this, and the line, when it cinches on itself, cuts itself. When it cuts itself, whatever you had on there is gone. So if you see that going through there and the line is standing on top of each other like that, cut your knot tight again. Make sure that that knot is parallel to or side by side each other, and you will be golden. Carolina rig baits, old trusty lizard, that's a great one. Fluke is a great one. Again, the one I talked about, structure bow, that's another one at Carolina rig. these 3 baits here and then a Senko are probably the 4 that see probably the most time. To me, a fluke for me for smallmouth here is probably my number 1. I throw a fluke predominantly, and it just and because it gets bit, like I catch a ton of fish on it. So other than that, that's pretty much how I set up my Carolina rigs. Um, Hopefully you can have some success with it too.
Awesome. Perfect. There's your tip of the week.
Tackle Warehouse has everything you need to get out and catch more bass. Rods for every application or technique. Over 1,000 reels to choose from. Monofilament, braid, and fluorocarbon lines. A massive selection of baits from the smallest to the largest. Exclusive baits and colors only available at Tackle Warehouse. Everything you need to build or customize your favorite lures. And of course, countless options to store it all. Tackle Warehouse. Click, save, fish.
Ever struggled to navigate shallow waters without damaging your boat? Realize your boat's potential with outboard motor performance products from Bob's Machine, an award-winning world leader in the marine industry since 1978. With over 45 years of dedication to quality, Bob's Machine offers innovative hydraulic transom jack plates and accessories for your boat.
All right, we just got through our Tackle Warehouse tip of the week. We got a lot of fundamentals covered. We got a lot of expansion covered on what you can do better to exceed on the water, your time on the water, and better benefit the fish you bring into the boat. And we're going to wrap up this week's episode talking about how important it is to start and have a structured plan for what your career is going to look like. So whether that's a professional angler, a college angler, a weekend angler, whatever that may be, we're just going to ask Darrel a couple questions on what his thoughts are on the best way to structure and start your future career and how important it is to have a stable structure and career as well as a backbone in case going pro doesn't work out. So, how do you feel about college fishing nowadays?
Um, it's fairly new because it's come about in my 20 years of bass fishing. There was no college fishing. There was no high school fishing. It was crazy. One of my Elite Series events on, I think it was Rayburn. There was a high school tournament for Texas there that day. 500 boats for a high school tournament. So you're talking 1,000 anglers. So you would think about, that's just Texas alone in Southeast Texas. I mean, think about across the whole East Coast board, how big high school. Well, I'm also a basketball coach, and we take into perspective how many kids are you going to see that come across? Now here we don't have very, our population isn't as big as some of the big Houston, Texas, or Dallas, Texas, or of these big cities. But as a percentage wise, the chances of you making a career out of fishing is very slim. Is it possible? Yeah, it is. It is. But you have to be somebody before you can be somebody, if that makes sense to you. You have to go out there and compete on a level and have the financial backing to be able to do it. Because if you go fish these tournaments, that was the one thing that was for me. I didn't have any financial strain as far as fishing Elite Series because I pretty much, here, just go. You just go fishing. If you're fishing, you're not going to fish clean because if your mind is constantly thinking about, man, I got to cut a check because I got to be able to pay my mortgage or I got to pay my truck payment or I got to pay this or whatever, then your mind is not focused on what you need to be focused on in the moment based on what tournaments you're fishing. So if I could tell any high school or college guy now, I would say that's the portion. Be as smart as you can be about fishing. Spend as much time on the water as you can with fishing, but don't put yourself in a bad situation. Don't credit cards, wrung out to the highest. He'll charge it up to because I want to make this. Man, be smart about this. Go get an education, get a job that pays you good. Think about what kind of job you can do that one has a pretty easy schedule, two pays good money. You could start at a young age in high school, figure this out and go make a good money where you can have the time off to go fish these tournaments or go do this stuff. And you still have the finances at home to pay your bills or do whatever you need to do. And some of the young guys don't have a family either. You don't have a wife, you don't have kids to support. That also makes a difference, right? So each person's equation is going to be totally different. But at a high school level, you could sure set yourself up for success in the future to be able to compete at a high level down the road by setting yourself up with a career of some sort that pays good money, do the work in school, college, and then that way your adult life, you can focus on the things that you really want to. Because it took me a long time. I didn't have my first boat till I turned 30. So for each person, their story is different. Mine, like I said, first glass boat I got when I turned 30, and now I'm on my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is boat 8. Nice in 20 years. So
Cool. Well, talking about boat real quick, and then we'll get back into the sport. Um, This is a pretty fast boat that you're in right now. This Bass Cat, they've been supporting you for years, it sounds like.
yep,
Pierce is a great guy. He
yep,
just got into the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame.
yep.
How nice is it knowing that you can pass the majority of the field on tournament day? And have you missed out on key spots because of being in the slower boat in the past?
I've told people from the beginning. So the very first boat I was in was a 19 footer with a 200, but the 200 was the 3-liter FI, which is everybody knows if you've ever had a 3-liter FI that they are an absolute monster. My little 19 footer was it was actually faster than this boat. 74.5 on Brownlee with 2 guys loaded. I mean, but I didn't have poles and 4 graph, 1 graph there, 1 graph up there, but to me, especially for our bodies of water, we make long runs. And if you have a faster boat to me, where it pays off, if I get 20 minutes longer fishing or I get 30 minutes longer fishing, because if I can cover that same distance faster than you can, then I have more time to keep my bait in the water, which in turn is going to be a benefit for me as far as catching bass and being successful in a tournament. Twofolds to that, understanding the boat brand that you run. Each person's going to be their own person. You have confidence in whatever boat brand. This is the boat brand that I have confidence in because of a lot of things and a lot of things that people don't think about. Like for instance, I can go back here, I can flip the lid, and I can reach down and touch my live well pumps. You don't think about this stuff. If you have a live well pump that fails in a derby day, a lot of the boats these days, they bury those live well pumps underneath mounts to be able to mount your battery. So if you have a live well pump go out, how do you touch it in a tournament to be able to take your build? Like for me, if I have a pump go out, I can swap it for my bilge pump. Take bilge pump out, drop it in, and within a minute's time, my pump is back going, and I can be back to fishing. And I don't have to worry about my fish, and still keeps me in contention to have a good tournament day. Whereas if I couldn't do that, if I kill all my fish in my live well, how do you win a tournament with fish? Right?
That's true.
The boat too, like rough water wise, I've had this thing in some and all my other cats too. They handle rough water really, really well. Um, as far as I'm concerned, they build the best boat on the market for the broad spectrum. When you classify ride, speed, quality, um, ergonomics, and if you know Rick Pierce, he does nothing on a boat without thought to the fishermen. The fishermen are his first thought. Will this be beneficial to a fisherman? And will this be beneficial in a day of fishing? Like everything he thought is forward thinking as far as how a boat is designed. And for me, I'll never own another brand. Basscat's whether I don't, and I'm not sponsored by Basscat. I was sponsored in the Elite Series, but as of right now, I paid from a dealer, no discount or nothing. I bought this boat outright. So I am nowhere loyal to them because of a sponsorship deal or nothing like that. I do this because this is what I have the most confidence in. And from here on out, I won't own another brand.
And how does it work? I know, Bass Cat, they build a quality boat, and generally you pay for quality nowadays in whatever field it is, whether it's a Four King Ranch or whatever it may be. But is it worth paying that extra money for a better quality product and better quality platform when this is your office? And have you seen guys with other boats that they're putting screws in to keep them together or whatever the story may be?
I tell you what, that boatyard. So everybody that's maybe not familiar with it, but the Elite Series has a traveling, basically repairman for each boat brand. So Ranger, Skeeter, at the time when I did it. So Ranger, Skeeter, Triton, Phoenix was just coming out on the like they had only been out a few years when we were out. But you have a mechanic or a guy that's dedicated to your brand. We had a Bass Cat guy, and you see certain things on how boats because we go to places where the water, like St. Clair, that's a big, big body of water. The Miracle Mile coming from Lake Huron to St. Clair, they call it the Miracle Mile for a reason. It's a nasty stretch of water, and boy, it can just absolutely just beat your product. Like guys, transoms cracked, Like, you see a ton of things go on, and and this is my opinion, each their own for guys that run boats, but really, in my opinion, there's 2 boat brands that lead the market right now. Basscat's 1, Phoenix is number 2. From there, you can probably put any of them in order down below that because of design of boat. I'm talking overall package. Basically, what does the boat bring to the table? Those are the 2 brands, in my opinion, that really are set above the majority of everything else. But yeah, you got to have, again, we've talked about the financial portion of it. If you're out fishing a tournament and you're worried about paying your mortgage, you probably shouldn't be fishing that derby. Same thing with your equipment. If I'm constantly on the water and having breakdowns of this and that and whatever, and I'm a big guy on maintenance, like you saw me yesterday. I had a latch break on one of my deals. 2 of my rivets popped off. We got home in the garage yesterday. What did I do? Drilled those rivets out, put new rivets, fixed my latch. You're going to have some sort of maintenance if you're fishing any kind of body of water. So your confidence in your boat brand, if that's what you have confidence in, run it. If you're a Skeeter guy or you're a Triton guy or you're a whoever you are, a Bullet, whatever, then run that brand. If that's what gives you confidence and helps you be a better fisherman because you're confident in what that is, then by all means, that's what you need to run.
Awesome. And how important is it to have a vision of the bottom line? So say you want to be a pro nowadays. There's MLF, there's Bass, there's Super 60 on the West Coast where you can still have a regular job at the same time. But each of these take commitment. I mean, you have to go through the Opens or the college series to get into the championship bracket and then so forth for Bass. For MLF, you have to go through the Toyota series and all these invitationals to get into the Bass Pro Tour.
Right.
Um, you can't just go back east and fish a few a beach and cherry pick because
No.
it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And even with our pro tour out here, you've got to fish the pro-ams. You've got to have a structured idea of what you're going to do, and you're going to have to be invested in it. Do you think that, I mean, individuals nowadays are as invested as the start of the, fishing career where, how it seems like people were sleeping in the back of their trucks and
Yeah.
they were living it, roughing it out to make it to the top, and they're still at the top nowadays. But out of that 125 field in the Elite Series, a lot of them are not going to be here in 5 years. Yeah, how important is that bid? And
You have to understand, and again, I use basketball, coaching basketball the same way. When you get kids that you spend enough time around playing basketball, you see kids that come at a young age that have a natural talent. And you have to have the conversation. Even my boys, I told them at a young age, I said, dude, if your aspirations are to be a college player or NBA player, that's a very lonely road. Generally, a kid your age at a young age, you are walking a road by yourself. Very seldom do you have kids your age that you'll be friends with that have the same like-minded thoughts. You're not, because you're going to spend a ton of time in the weight room. You're going to spend a ton of time in the gym. You're going to spend a ton of time doing things and forgoing partying with your friends or having a girlfriend or all these things. You're not going to get those amenities because you have a vision of where you want to get to. Bass fishing is no different. You have to have that structured vision to see where it is. It's not where you're standing, it's where you want to get to. I can see the light down at the end of the tunnel, but how do I get there? Well, you're going to sacrifice. What are you going to give up? Buying a rock star twice a day, every day, or whatever. You're going to save pennies and every dollar that you could possibly set aside to put towards tournament fees or to buy rods or to buy reels. Because when you start out, until you've gotten to a place where you have either won a big tournament or a couple big tournaments or consistently shown in the angler year race in a particular circuit that you can compete, you're not going to get help as far as rods, reels, tackle, all those things. They're not going to give you that help because they want who is out there on the front lines that's going to be the face of their product. So save pennies, save dollar, do everything you can to save every amount of money. Be mindful of gas. If you're a high school kid and you can't drive and parents are doing it, even worse. Make sure you're mowing the yard. Make sure you're doing the dishes. Make sure you're doing the laundry. Make sure that you're doing all the things that makes it as easy as possible on your parents to get you to that position, to get you to where you want to go, whether they're driving you to a lake or they're buying the boat to get you out on the water. Make sure that you do this, because if you do those things, the same way you take care of your parents is the same thing you're going to do to take care of a tackle supplier, a reel supplier, a rod company, or a boat brand, or a motor company. If you have those, you take care of your parents like that, you know dang well you're going to take care of somebody else like that. And in my eyes, having um, good characteristics as a person, where I'm like, for me, my thing is big. Character and integrity are two big ones for me. Those are two things I protect. I don't. There's no sacrificing anything when it comes to that. I'm always going to take the right road when it comes to that. At least is the way that I see fit. So, um, yeah, go after it, but make sure you're mindful of what you're doing and appreciate the people that help you get there. If somebody's giving you a hand, giving you a ride to the lake, you know, especially the young guys, I'm sure you have some old heads that help you. They go fishing with you, get in the boat with them, and they show you tips and techniques and whatnot. Appreciate those guys because they've obviously done it. Same thing I do. Guys ask me all the time, "Hey, how do you do this, or what do you do here?" I'm an open book, guys. You ever see me anywhere and you want to know, I'll tell you everything I know about anything that I know about. I am not partial to anything. Some guys are super protective about what they do. That's not me. I want to grow. Whoever, if you want to know about it, I'm more than happy to tell you what I know, whether it helps you or it doesn't help you.
Yeah, and don't burn that. I mean, it's very, very rare to find people with good integrity and that have the class to help you. And I think that's a great spot to end this episode on the Blast Off, the BAM podcast, and all of the different streaming devices that you can watch this on. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, find us on social media. And we do different episodes every week showcasing the talent of the Western angler and the industry in general. So it's a great time here with Darrel. I mean, he dove in on the characteristics of a quality angler, how being successful can play a big part, but also playing fairly and playing with ethics and standards goes a long way as well. And you learned about how to throw a Carolina rig. So, I mean, this was a pretty full service episode. If you like these episodes, let us know what we can do better. And make sure if you're a subscriber, as soon as we hit 250, we're giving a free pair of Costa glasses away to one lucky winner. We're also going to be throwing in some P-Line products. We'll be giving some GSM products and making sure you get a good prize package for following along and supporting our brand that we're trying to build. We'll see you on the next one, and thanks again.
Randall and I want to talk to you real quick about choosing the right electronics mount for your bass boat.
And we know the quality and effort that Van Foster has put into this company.
So what you get is a custom fitted mount, not some mass produced universal mount for every bass boat out there.
Seat pedestal plugs, tool holders, steering wheel spacers, and battery trays are all made with the same attention to detail that Bass Boat Technologies is known for. Check them out at bassboattech.com. You'll be glad you did.